Greenland, a land of ice, silence, and ancient power, where nature still rules, untouched by time.
What is Denmark's relationship with Greenland, and why is Greenland important? Imagine a land at the top of the world, a frozen giant shrouded in mystery, ice, and silence. To the naked eye, Greenland is a sleeping beauty of the Arctic. But look closer, and you will see that this island is actually the center of a high-stakes global chess game. Welcome to the story of a complex bond between two nations separated by an ocean, but tied by history. This is the saga of Denmark and Greenland. From the ancient roots of the Inuit people to the arrival of Danish colonizers, we will uncover how a land of hunters became a geopolitical prize. We'll explore the scars of colonization and the rising voice of a people demanding their own identity. But this isn't just history, it is a story unfolding right now. As the ice melts, it reveals trillion-dollar secrets, rare earth minerals that have superpowers like the United States, China, and Russia watching closely. Does Greenland hold the key to the future of the Arctic? Can it break free from Denmark to stand alone as an independent nation, or will it become the battleground for the next Cold War? Join us as we journey through the ice to uncover the culture, the politics, and the untold power struggles of the North. This is the story of Greenland.
What is Greenland? An introduction to its land, people, and culture. Greenland is the largest island in the world, yet it is also one of the least populated and most misunderstood places on Earth. To many, it appears as a frozen, distant land with little relevance to the modern world. In reality, Greenland is a living Arctic society with a deep human history, a strong indigenous culture, and a landscape that has shaped its people for thousands of years. Understanding Greenland begins with three elements: its land, its people, and its culture. The land, a country shaped by ice. Greenland covers about 2.16 million square kilometers, but more than 80% of its surface is covered by ice. This massive ice sheet is the second largest on Earth after Antarctica and reaches depths of over 3 kilometers in some places. Because of this ice, most of Greenland's population lives along the coastal edges where the land meets the sea. There are no road networks connecting most towns. Travel depends on boats, planes, helicopters, and, in some regions, traditional dog sleds. Greenland's landscape is defined by vast glaciers, deep fjords carved by ancient ice, harsh Arctic weather, extreme seasonal light and darkness. Nature dominates life here. Human settlement exists only where the land allows it. The people, the Inuit of Greenland. Greenland is home to around 56,000 people, the majority of whom are Inuit, the indigenous people of the Arctic. The Inuit did not arrive to conquer Greenland, they arrived to survive. Over thousands of years, Inuit communities developed deep knowledge of ice conditions, weather patterns, marine animals, and Arctic navigation. Hunting, fishing, and cooperation were essential to survival. Community was not a choice, it was a necessity. These survival-based values still influence Greenlandic society today. Despite centuries of outside control and cultural pressure, Inuit identity remains central to Greenland. Language, the core of identity. The Greenlandic language, Kalaallisut, is a key part of national identity. It belongs to the Inuit language family and is uniquely adapted to describe Arctic life, especially ice, snow, and nature. During the colonial period, Danish was promoted as the dominant language, often at the expense of Greenlandic. Today, Kalaallisut is the official language of Greenland, symbolizing cultural survival and self-respect. In Greenland, language is not just communication, it is history and resistance. Culture, life built around nature. Greenlandic culture developed under extreme conditions. As a result, it emphasizes cooperation over competition, respect for nature, sharing resources, and emotional resilience. Traditional storytelling, music, carving, and drum dancing passed down survival knowledge and moral lessons. These traditions were not simply cultural expressions, they were tools for living. Even in modern Greenland, where technology and global connections exist, traditional values remain influential, especially in smaller communities. Spiritual roots. Before Christianity, Inuit belief systems were deeply connected to nature. Animals, ice, wind, and sea were believed to have spirits, and humans were expected to live in balance with them. Christianity later spread through Danish missionaries, but many Greenlanders still carry elements of traditional spiritual thinking, creating a blended cultural identity. Modern Greenland. Today, Greenland exists between tradition and change. Cities like Nuuk, the capital, are modern Arctic urban centers, while many coastal settlements continue traditional ways of life. Greenlandic society faces challenges linked to colonial history, economic dependence, cultural preservation, and rapid environmental change. Yet Greenland is not frozen in the past. It is slowly shaping its own future. Why Greenland matters as a place. Before Greenland can be understood as a geopolitical asset or a strategic territory, it must be understood as a home, a place where people have lived, adapted, and endured for generations. Greenland is not empty. It is not irrelevant. It is not silent. It is a land where geography shapes culture, and culture shapes identity.
How did Denmark colonize Greenland? Denmark's colonization of Greenland was not a sudden invasion or a violent conquest. It was a slow, quiet, and systematic process carried out through religion, trade control, administration, and cultural influence. This method made colonization less visible, but no less powerful. Understanding this process is essential to understanding Greenland's modern identity and political struggle. Greenland before Danish control. Before Denmark established control, Greenland was inhabited entirely by Inuit communities who had lived there for thousands of years. These societies were self-sufficient, organized around hunting, fishing, and deep environmental knowledge. There was no centralized state, but there was social order, leadership, and strong cultural identity. Greenland was not empty or ungoverned. It simply did not fit European ideas of sovereignty. European claims and justification. Denmark-Norway claimed Greenland based on Old Norse settlements and European legal traditions. Like other colonial powers, Denmark did not recognize indigenous societies as legitimate political entities. This belief allowed Denmark to claim Greenland without treaties, consent, or negotiation with the Inuit population. Colonization began with justification, not force. The arrival of Hans Egede, 1721. Modern colonization began in 1721 when Danish-Norwegian missionary Hans Egede arrived in Greenland. His official mission was to spread Christianity and re-establish contact with Norse descendants. Although no Norse settlers remained, Egede stayed and began converting Inuit communities. His settlement near present-day Nuuk marked the beginning of permanent European presence. Religion became the first foundation of Danish control. Christianity as a tool of control. Christian missionaries worked to replace Inuit spiritual beliefs with Christian teachings. Traditional practices were discouraged, and European moral values were introduced. Christianity helped reshape social structures and authority, making it easier for Danish governance to follow. Over time, religious influence reduced resistance and normalized external control. Trade monopolies and economic dependence. Denmark soon established state-controlled trade monopolies. Greenlanders were restricted to trading only with Danish authorities, cutting them off from foreign markets. This system controlled prices, limited economic choice, and created dependency on Danish supplies. Traditional livelihoods became tied to Danish trade networks, reducing Greenland's economic independence. Administrative and cultural colonization. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Denmark governed Greenland through Danish administrators, Danish laws, Danish language education. Greenlanders were treated as subjects, not equals. Decision-making power remained entirely in Copenhagen. Danish culture was promoted as modern, while Inuit traditions were often seen as backward. This created cultural hierarchy and long-term identity conflict. The myth of a gentle colonization. Denmark often describes its rule as peaceful compared to other empires. While Greenland did not experience mass violence, colonization still caused deep harm. Greenland lost political autonomy, economic freedom, cultural confidence. Colonization does not need violence to be damaging. World War II, a turning point. During World War II, Denmark was occupied by Germany, cutting Greenland off from Danish control. Greenland managed its affairs with support from the United States. This period proved that Greenland could function without direct Danish governance and permanently changed the power relationship. From colony to integration. In 1953, Denmark officially ended Greenland's colonial status and made it part of the Danish kingdom. While this ended formal colonial rule, real power remained unequal. However, this step opened the door to later reforms and eventual self-government. Lasting impact of colonization. Denmark colonized Greenland through systems rather than armies. Religion reshaped belief. Trade created dependency. Administration centralized power. Culture reshaped identity. These effects still shape Greenland's political debates and independence movement today. Denmark did not take Greenland by force. It took Greenland through time, systems, and control. This quiet form of colonization explains why Greenland's struggle today is not just political, but historical and cultural.
Who are the Inuit, and what was Greenland like before Danish rule? To understand Greenland before Danish rule, one must first understand the Inuit, the indigenous people whose culture, knowledge, and way of life shaped the island long before European contact. Greenland was not an empty or undeveloped land awaiting discovery. It was a functioning society, carefully adapted to one of the harshest environments on Earth. Before Denmark arrived, Greenland already had its own people, systems, and identity. Origins of the Inuit. The Inuit are an Arctic people whose ancestors migrated from Siberia into North America thousands of years ago. Over time, these populations spread across Alaska, northern Canada, and Greenland. The Inuit who settled Greenland belonged mainly to the Thule culture, which reached the island around the 13th century. They brought advanced Arctic technologies such as kayaks and large skin boats, dog sleds for transportation, harpoons and hunting tools, clothing designed for extreme cold. These innovations allowed the Inuit to thrive in conditions where most societies could not survive. Greenland as an Inuit homeland. Before Danish rule, Greenland was entirely Inuit land. There was no central government, written law, or European-style state, but there was social order and stability. Inuit society was organized around small, closely connected communities, seasonal movement based on hunting cycles, leadership based on experience and respect. Authority was informal, and decisions were made collectively.
Cooperation, not control, held society together. Daily life and survival. Life before colonization was shaped by the environment. Inuit communities depended on hunting seals, whales, fish, birds, and caribou. Nothing was wasted. Every part of an animal had a purpose. Food sharing was a social rule, not a choice. Survival depended on trust and mutual responsibility. Hoarding was socially unacceptable as it endangered the entire community. This system created strong social bonds and ensured long-term stability. Environmental knowledge. Inuit survival relied on deep environmental knowledge passed down orally through generations. This included reading ice conditions, predicting weather changes, understanding animal behavior, navigating frozen seas. Children learned by observing elders, not through formal schooling. This knowledge allowed Inuit communities to live independently without outside support. European observers later failed to recognize this as a sophisticated knowledge system. Culture and storytelling. Storytelling was central to Inuit culture. Stories taught moral values, survival lessons, and respect for nature. Music, drum dancing, carving, and song strengthened community bonds and preserved identity. Culture was not separate from daily life. It was part of survival itself. Before Danish Christianity, Inuit spirituality was deeply connected to nature. Animals, ice, sea, and weather believed to have spirits. Hunters followed moral codes to maintain balance with the natural world. Shamans acted as spiritual guides, helping communities deal with illness, fear, and imbalance. This belief system encouraged ethical behavior and environmental respect. Health and social resilience. Life in pre-colonial Greenland was physically demanding, but Inuit communities developed systems that promoted resilience. Traditional medicine, physical care, and strong social inclusion helped maintain both physical and mental health. Although life expectancy was lower due to environmental risks, Inuit society was stable and functional. Limited contact with outsiders. Before Danish colonization, contact with Europeans was rare and temporary. Earlier Norse settlements had disappeared centuries earlier, and occasional encounters with explorers or whalers did not significantly alter Inuit society. Greenland remained culturally independent and self-governing. European misunderstanding. When Europeans later encountered the Inuit, they often misjudged Inuit society as primitive because it did not resemble European political or economic systems. This misunderstanding later became a justification for colonization. In reality, Inuit society was not inferior, it was perfectly adapted to its environment. Greenland before Danish rule. Before Denmark, Greenland was culturally independent, politically autonomous, socially cooperative, environmentally balanced. It did not rely on foreign governance, religion, or trade. The Inuit are not a background element of Greenland's history, they are its foundation. Before Danish rule, Greenland was already a complete society, shaped by knowledge, cooperation, and deep connection to the natural world. Understanding who the Inuit are and what Greenland was like before colonization is essential to understanding Greenland's present struggles over identity, autonomy, and self-determination. What did Greenland lose during the colonial period? Colonialism does not only take land. Often, it takes something far deeper and far harder to recover. During the colonial period under Danish rule, Greenland did not experience large-scale wars or violent conquest, yet the losses Greenland suffered were profound. They were structural, cultural, psychological, and political, and many of them are still felt today. To understand modern Greenland, one must understand what was taken away during colonization. Loss of political self-determination. Before Danish rule, Greenlandic Inuit communities governed themselves according to their own social systems. Leadership was local, flexible, and based on trust and experience. Colonization removed this autonomy. Political decisions affecting Greenland were gradually transferred to Copenhagen. Laws, policies, and administrative rules were created by people who did not live in Greenland and did not experience its realities. Greenlanders became subjects of decisions made elsewhere. The right to shape their own future was lost. Loss of economic independence. Before colonization, Greenland's economy was based on self-sufficiency, hunting, fishing, and sharing resources within communities. Under Danish rule, Greenland was placed under state-controlled trade monopolies. Greenlanders were restricted in who they could trade with and at what prices. Over time, survival became linked to Danish supply systems. This created long-term dependency. Greenland lost control over trade, freedom to develop its own economy, the ability to interact independently with the outside world. Economic dependence replaced economic autonomy. Loss of cultural confidence. One of the most damaging losses was cultural confidence. Danish colonial policy often treated Inuit culture as inferior or outdated. European ways of life, education, and values were promoted as superior and modern. As a result, traditional knowledge was devalued. Indigenous practices were discouraged. Greenlanders were taught to see themselves through a colonial lens. This did not erase Inuit culture, but it weakened confidence in it. Colonization taught many Greenlanders to doubt their own traditions. Loss of language status. Although Greenlandic, kalaallisut, survived, Danish became the dominant language of administration, education, and opportunity during much of the colonial period. Language became a gatekeeper. Danish opened doors to power and education. Greenlandic was pushed to the margins. This created inequality within Greenlandic society and weakened the public status of the native language. Language loss was not total, but language authority was diminished. Loss of social balance. Colonial systems disrupted traditional Inuit social structures. Community-based decision-making and shared responsibility were gradually replaced by external authority and institutional control. This shift weakened community cohesion, traditional conflict resolution, local responsibility. The result was social disorientation, people living in systems they did not design and could not fully control. Loss without visible violence. One reason Greenland's colonial experience is often misunderstood is because much of this loss occurred without visible violence. There were no mass land seizures or major wars, but loss does not require brutality to be real. Colonialism in Greenland worked through administration, education, trade control, cultural pressure. The damage was quiet, but lasting. What Greenland did not lose. It is equally important to note what Greenland did not lose. Despite colonization, Inuit identity survived. Indigenous language endured. Cultural memory remained. The desire for self-determination continued. These survivals later became the foundation for Greenland's push towards self-government. During the colonial period, Greenland lost far more than political control. It lost autonomy, economic freedom, cultural confidence, and the right to define itself on its own terms. These losses explain why modern Greenland's struggle is not just about independence, it is about restoring what was taken quietly. Colonization did not erase Greenland, but it reshaped it, and the effects are still unfolding. How did Greenland transition from a colony to self-government? After centuries of colonial rule, Greenland's move to self-government was not sudden, dramatic, or revolutionary. It was slow, cautious, and shaped by the very losses colonialism had created. Understanding this transition requires seeing it not as a clean break, but as a gradual reclaiming of control. From colony to integration. In 1953, Denmark officially ended Greenland's status as a colony and declared it an integral part of the Danish kingdom. On paper, this looked like progress. Greenlanders were granted Danish citizenship, and Greenland was promised equal treatment within the state. In reality, however, power remained centralized in Copenhagen. Colonialism did not disappear, it changed form. Modernization and its consequences. Denmark launched large-scale modernization programs in Greenland during the mid-20th century. These policies aimed to improve healthcare, housing, and education. While living standards improved in some areas, the changes came at a cost. Traditional lifestyles were disrupted, communities were relocated, Danish norms dominated public life. Modernization often felt imposed rather than chosen. This period deepened the awareness that Greenland needed control over its own development. The rise of political consciousness. By the 1960s and 1970s, a new Greenlandic political awareness emerged. Educated Greenlanders began questioning why decisions were still made in Denmark, why Greenlandic culture had limited influence, why economic dependence continued. Cultural revival movements and political organizations began demanding autonomy, not separation, but self-rule. Home rule, the first major shift. In 1979, Greenland achieved home rule. This was a historic turning point. Greenland gained authority over key internal matters such as education, health, social services, and cultural affairs. Denmark remained responsible for foreign policy, defense, and monetary matters. For the first time in modern history, Greenlanders governed themselves in meaningful ways. Self-Government Act of 2009. The most significant step came in 2009 with the Self-Government Act. This law recognized Greenlanders as a distinct people, gave Greenland control over natural resources, declared the right to independence under international law. Denmark remained responsible for defense and foreign affairs, but Greenland's political authority expanded dramatically. This was not independence, but it was ownership of the future. A transition still in progress. Greenland's transition did not erase colonial legacies overnight. Economic dependence, administrative challenges, and external pressures remain. Self-government is not an endpoint, it is a process. Greenland is no longer a colony, but it is still navigating the space between autonomy and independence. Greenland's transition from colony to self-government was shaped by loss, reform, resistance, and gradual empowerment. It was not about cutting ties, it was about reclaiming voice. And that journey is still unfolding.
What is Greenland's current political status within the Kingdom of Denmark? Today, Greenland occupies a unique political position, one that exists between autonomy and dependence, self-rule and shared sovereignty. To understand Greenland's current status, we must understand the structure of the Kingdom of Denmark itself. The Kingdom of Denmark, a three-part state. The Kingdom of Denmark is not a single, uniform nation-state. It is a realm made up of three distinct parts: Denmark proper, Greenland, the Faroe Islands. Each part has its own political system, identity, and degree of autonomy. Greenland is not governed as a Danish province. It is a self-governing country within the Danish realm. Self-government under the 2009 Act. Greenland's current political status is defined by the Self-Government Act of 2009. Under this arrangement, Greenland has its own parliament, Inatsisartut. It elects its own government, Naalakkersuisut, and it controls most domestic affairs.
This means Greenland manages education, healthcare, natural resources, environment, social policy, fisheries, and hunting. In everyday life, Greenland governs itself. What Denmark still controls. Despite this autonomy, Greenland is not fully sovereign. Denmark retains authority over foreign policy, defense and security affairs, citizenship and passports, the Danish constitution, the Supreme Court. Denmark also provides an annual financial grant, which remains an important part of Greenland's economy. This creates a relationship that is political partnership, not colonial rule, but also not equality. Representation without full power. Greenland has representation in the Danish parliament, Folketing, with 2 elected members. However, this representation does not give Greenland full influence over decisions that affect the entire kingdom, especially in foreign and security policy. Greenland's voice exists, but it does not always decide. A status defined by balance. Greenland's current political status today is best described as a negotiated balance, autonomy without full independence, self-rule within a larger state, recognition as a distinct people without full sovereignty. This balance allows Greenland to govern itself while relying on Denmark for protection and international representation. But it also creates tension because ultimate authority still lies outside Greenland. Why this status matters. Greenland's current political position explains many of the debates that follow. Why independence is discussed seriously. Why foreign powers engage through Denmark. Why Greenland seeks more control over diplomacy and resources. This is not a temporary arrangement, it is a deliberate political choice, shaped by history, geography, and global pressure. Greenland today is a self-governing nation within the Kingdom of Denmark, neither colony nor independent state. It governs itself at home, it shares sovereignty abroad. And that fragile balance defines every political conversation that comes next. How much power does Denmark still have over Greenland? Greenland today governs much of its internal life, yet the most critical forms of power remain shared or reserved by Denmark. This creates a political reality where autonomy exists, but within carefully defined limits. Denmark's influence is no longer colonial or direct. Instead, it operates through strategic control, legal authority, and international representation. Foreign policy, the gatekeeper of the world. Greenland does not conduct an independent foreign policy. Although Greenland can participate in international discussions related to fisheries, climate, and Arctic cooperation, it cannot act as a sovereign state on the global stage. Formal diplomacy, treaty-making, and international recognition still flow through Copenhagen. This means Greenland's international relations are filtered. Its interests may be voiced, but final decisions rest with Denmark. Defense, security, and strategic territory. Denmark maintains full authority over defense and security. Greenland's location gives it immense military importance, yet Greenland itself has no army, no independent security doctrine, and no control over military agreements. Danish decisions in this area shape how Greenland fits into global security structures. This concentration of power reflects Denmark's view of Greenland as strategically essential, not merely autonomous territory. Constitutional authority and legal limits. Greenland's autonomy exists within the framework of the Danish constitution. This constitution defines Greenland's self-government, sets the boundaries of its authority, and places ultimate sovereignty with the Danish state. If a political conflict arises over power, Denmark's legal system has the final word. Economic influence beyond governance. Denmark provides a substantial annual block grant to Greenland. While this support does not control policy directly, it deeply influences political reality. Public services, infrastructure, and administrative stability depend on this funding. As a result, Denmark holds economic leverage, not as a tool of pressure, but as a structural reality. Economic dependence limits how far autonomy can go. Symbolic and institutional power. Denmark remains visible in Greenland through symbols of statehood. The Danish monarch, the shared flag relationship, national institutions. These symbols reinforce the idea that Greenland exists within a larger political order. Denmark does not rule Greenland, but it still frames Greenland's political horizon. Greenland decides how it lives. Denmark decides how far that self-rule can extend. Power today is not about control over people. It is about control over borders, diplomacy, security, and law.
Which areas does Greenland control and which remain under Denmark? Greenland's political system is built on a division of authority. Power is not shared equally, but it is clearly divided. Some areas are fully controlled by Greenland, while others remain firmly under Denmark's responsibility. Understanding this division is essential to understanding Greenland's political reality. Areas controlled by Greenland. Under the Self-Government Act, Greenland controls most internal affairs, the areas that shape daily life and national identity. Domestic governance. Greenland has full authority over education and schools, healthcare systems, social welfare, housing and local infrastructure, culture and language policy. These policies are designed, funded, and managed by Greenlandic institutions. Natural resources and environment. One of Greenland's most powerful areas of control is natural resources. Greenland governs mining and mineral licenses, oil and gas exploration, environmental regulation, land use and environmental protection. Revenue from these resources belongs to Greenland, not Denmark. This control is central to Greenland's long-term vision of independence. Fisheries and hunting. Fisheries form the backbone of Greenland's economy. Greenland fully controls fishing quotas, hunting regulations, marine resource management. This authority reflects Greenland's cultural and economic priorities. Internal administration and justice, limited. Greenland manages much of its internal administration, including local courts and policing, though ultimate legal authority still connects to Denmark. Areas controlled by Denmark. Despite wide autonomy, Denmark retains power over sovereign and strategic domains. Foreign affairs. Denmark represents Greenland internationally. Only Denmark can sign international treaties, conduct formal diplomacy, represent Greenland in global institutions. Greenland may advise, but Denmark decides. Defense and security. Denmark controls military presence, airspace and maritime security, defense agreements, strategic installations. Greenland has no independent military authority. Citizenship and constitutional authority. Greenlanders are Danish citizens. Denmark controls citizenship laws, passports, the constitution, supreme legal authority. Greenland does not have constitutional sovereignty. Monetary policy and currency. Denmark controls currency, central banking, monetary policy. Greenland does not issue its own money. A system of divided power. This division creates a system where Greenland is politically autonomous at home, strategically dependent abroad. Greenland controls how it lives, Denmark controls how it exists internationally. Why this division matters. This balance explains why independence debates continue, why economic self-sufficiency is critical, why foreign powers must negotiate through Denmark. It also explains the tension between autonomy and sovereignty.
Greenland today governs its land, resources, culture, and people. Denmark governs its borders, security, diplomacy, and legal framework. Together, they form a political arrangement that works, but remains unfinished.
Does Greenland want full independence from Denmark? For Greenland, independence is not a single political demand. It is a long, emotional conversation shaped by history, identity, and practical reality. Unlike many independence movements driven by crisis or conflict, Greenland's debate is quiet, reflective, and deeply cautious. The question is not whether independence is desirable. The question is whether it is possible without losing stability, dignity, and control. Historical weight behind the desire. Centuries of external rule left Greenlanders with limited political voice. Even after self-government, the awareness remains that ultimate authority still lies outside the island. For many Greenlanders, independence represents a final break from colonial legacy, full recognition as a people, not a territory, control over their own destiny. This desire is rooted less in anger toward Denmark and more in a natural human need for self-determination. Support in principle, caution in practice. Public opinion in Greenland consistently shows broad support for independence in principle. However, when independence is discussed in practical terms, opinions become more careful. Many Greenlanders ask, will independence improve everyday life? Can public services remain strong? Will independence replace one dependency with another? This cautious mindset reflects political maturity rather than hesitation. Economic dependence as the central barrier. The greatest obstacle to full independence is economic reality. Greenland's economy depends heavily on fisheries and annual financial support from Denmark. This support helps fund healthcare, education, infrastructure, social welfare. Without a diversified economy, full independence could create financial vulnerability. Greenlanders are acutely aware that political freedom without economic strength could invite external pressure from global powers. Identity already reclaimed. For many Greenlanders, independence is no longer about identity survival. Greenland has already reclaimed its language, cultural pride, educational direction. In daily life, Greenland already feels like a nation. Political sovereignty is seen as the final layer, not the foundation, of identity. Generational perspectives. Younger Greenlanders often express stronger emotional support for independence. They grew up under self-government, speak Greenlandic confidently, and feel culturally secure. Older generations, shaped by colonial-era realities, tend to value stability and social protection more strongly. This generational balance slows the independence timeline, but strengthens its long-term foundation. A relationship, not a rebellion. Greenland's independence debate is not framed as a revolt against Denmark. Denmark is often viewed as a partner, a guarantor of security, a transitional support, and the real challenge is independence from dependency, not independence from Denmark alone. Yes, Greenland wants independence, but not recklessly and not symbolically. It seeks independence that is economically sustainable, politically stable, culturally secure. Until those conditions are met, Greenland chooses patience over urgency. Independence is the destination, preparation is the journey.
What do Greenlandic people think about independence? Among Greenlandic people, independence is not a distant political slogan, it is a personal, lived question. It touches identity, family history, economic security, and the future of the next generation. There's no single Greenlandic opinion on independence. Instead, there's a spectrum of views shaped by experience, age, geography, and economic reality. Widespread emotional support. At an emotional level, many Greenlanders support independence. For them, independence represents pride in Inuit identity, freedom from historical imbalance, full ownership of their land and resources. This support is especially strong when independence is discussed as a long-term goal rather than an immediate break.
Practical concerns shape opinion. When discussions move from emotion to implementation, opinions become more cautious. Many Greenlanders ask practical questions. Who will fund hospitals and schools? How will pensions and welfare be maintained? Can the economy survive global competition? These concerns do not signal opposition, they reflect responsibility. Urban and rural differences. Views on independence often differ between urban centers and smaller communities. In larger towns, people are more exposed to global ideas, education, and political debate. Support for independence is often more vocal there. In remote communities where public services and subsidies are essential, concerns about economic security tend to weigh more heavily. Generational divide. Younger Greenlanders view independence as natural and inevitable. They grew up with self-government and feel culturally confident. Older generations, shaped by colonial administration and early modernization, often emphasize stability, welfare, and continuity. This divide creates a balanced national conversation rather than polarization. Fear of new dependence. A common concern across society is the fear of replacing Danish dependence with reliance on larger global powers. Many Greenlanders worry that independence without strong institutions could invite economic pressure, resource exploitation, political influence from abroad. This fear encourages patience and strategic thinking. Independence as a process, not an event. Most Greenlanders do not view independence as an urgent rupture. Instead, they see it as a gradual strengthening of capacity, economic diversification, institutional development. Independence is widely seen as a destination, not a deadline. Greenlandic people largely support independence, but thoughtfully, cautiously, and on their own terms. They want independence that protects their culture, secures their economy, and safeguards their future. Until those conditions are met, the majority choose preparation over speed.
What are the biggest challenges to Greenland becoming independent? Greenland's struggle for independence is often misunderstood from the outside. The challenge is not political legitimacy, public support, or cultural readiness. Greenland already possesses those. The real obstacles are structural, economic, and geopolitical, and they are deeply interconnected. Independence, in Greenland's case, is not blocked by resistance, but by responsibility. Economic dependence, the core barrier. The single most significant challenge is economic dependence. Greenland's public sector is heavily supported by an annual financial transfer from Denmark. This funding underpins healthcare systems, education, infrastructure, social welfare, government administration. Independence would require Greenland to replace this funding with domestic revenue. At present, there is no immediate alternative capable of sustaining the same level of public services. Economic freedom without economic strength would risk social collapse rather than empowerment. Narrow economic base. Greenland's economy is highly concentrated. Fisheries dominate exports and employment, leaving the country vulnerable to environmental changes, market fluctuations, resource depletion. A sovereign state cannot rely on a single sector. Diversification is essential, but extremely difficult in a remote Arctic environment with high operating costs and limited workforce. Wealth, opportunity, and risk. Greenland is rich in minerals, rare earth elements, and potential energy resources. On paper, this appears to solve the independence question. In reality, it complicates it. Developing these resources requires massive foreign investment, advanced technical expertise, long-term infrastructure. This creates a paradox. Independence would require opening the door to external actors, potentially replacing Danish influence with stronger, less transparent global powers. Environmental fragility. Greenland's environment is both its strength and its vulnerability. Large-scale economic development risks irreversible ecological damage, disruption of traditional livelihoods, loss of global environmental credibility. For a country whose identity is tied to land, ice, and nature, environmental compromise is not just economic, it is existential. Small population, big state responsibilities. Greenland's population is small and geographically dispersed. An independent state must maintain diplomatic services, regulatory institutions, financial oversight, emergency and security systems. These functions require specialized expertise and administrative depth that small states struggle to sustain without external partnerships. Defense and security in a strategic location. Greenland's location places it at the center of Arctic geopolitics. Independence would not remove external interest, it would intensify it. A sovereign Greenland would face pressure to align with military powers, responsibility for vast airspace and waters, security risks tied to global competition. Without Denmark, Greenland would need new security arrangements, each carrying political consequences. Risk of new dependency. Perhaps the most profound concern among Greenlanders is this: independence could replace a predictable democratic partner with powerful external actors driven by strategic interests rather than shared values. This fear shapes public caution more than loyalty to Denmark. Social stability and public trust. Greenlanders place enormous value on social equality and welfare. Any independence process that threatens healthcare access, education quality, social security would lose public legitimacy instantly. Independence must protect society, not gamble with it. Psychological weight of responsibility. Finally, independence brings psychological pressure. Self-rule means there is no one else to blame. Success and failure become fully national. This responsibility weighs heavily on political leaders and citizens alike. Patience, therefore, is not weakness, it is awareness. Conclusion. Greenland's biggest challenges are not about wanting independence, but about sustaining it. Economic resilience, institutional strength, environmental protection, security planning, and social trust must all align. Until they do, Greenland chooses preparation over speed. Independence is not being delayed, it is being built carefully.
Why is Greenland strategically important in global politics? Greenland's importance in global politics has very little to do with its population and everything to do with its location, resources, and future. In the 21st century, Greenland sits at the intersection of climate change, military strategy, and great power competition. What once seemed like a frozen periphery is now a central chessboard of global geopolitics. Geography that shapes power, Greenland occupies a commanding position between North America and Europe. It lies along the shortest routes between major military and commercial powers. Control over Greenland means control over airspace, sea lanes, and early warning systems across the North Atlantic and Arctic regions. In geopolitical terms, geography is destiny, and Greenland's geography is unmatched. The Arctic as a new strategic frontier. Climate change is rapidly transforming the Arctic. As ice melts, new shipping routes are emerging, access to resources is expanding, military presence is increasing, and Greenland sits at the heart of this transformation. Any power seeking influence in the Arctic must consider Greenland. Military and security significance. Greenland has long played a role in global security. During the Cold War, it was central to early warning systems and transatlantic defense. Today, its value has increased as global tensions rise.
Modern security concerns include missile detection, air and naval surveillance, strategic defense positioning. These factors place Greenland firmly within NATO and Western security planning. Natural resources and strategic materials. Greenland is believed to hold significant reserves of rare earth elements, critical minerals, potential energy resources. These materials are essential for modern technology, renewable energy, and military systems. Control over such resources reduces dependence on rival powers and strengthens strategic autonomy. Great power competition. Global powers do not view Greenland in isolation. The United States, China, and Russia all see Greenland as strategically relevant, but for different reasons. The U.S. focuses on defense and Arctic security. China sees resource access and future trade routes. Russia views Arctic dominance as a national priority. Greenland has become a quiet focal point of global competition. Climate change and global impact. Greenland's ice sheet plays a critical role in global sea levels and climate systems. What happens in Greenland affects coastal cities worldwide, ocean circulation, and global climate stability. This gives Greenland scientific and environmental importance far beyond its borders. Why Greenland cannot be ignored. Greenland's strategic importance means it cannot remain geopolitically neutral or invisible. Even without seeking attention, global forces are drawn to it. This reality shapes Greenland's political choices and explains why independence must be carefully managed. Greenland matters because the world is changing. As climate shifts, Arctic access expands, and global power competition intensifies, Greenland moves from the edge of the map to its center. It is not a small place in global politics. It is a strategic hinge upon which the future balance of power may turn. Why is the United States interested in Greenland? The United States' interest in Greenland is not sudden, emotional, or symbolic. It is strategic, long-term, and deeply rooted in geography, security, and global power competition. For Washington, Greenland is not just a remote Arctic island, it is a critical asset in protecting North America and maintaining influence in the Arctic. Greenland as a shield for North America. Greenland sits directly between the United States and potential adversaries across the Arctic. Any missile, aircraft, or military movement between Eurasia and North America must pass near or over Greenland. This makes Greenland a natural early warning platform. For the U.S., control and access to Greenland equals protection of the American homeland. Thule Air Base and military presence. The United States has maintained a military presence in Greenland since World War II. The Thule Air Base, now Pitufik Space Base, is a cornerstone of missile detection systems, space surveillance, and Arctic defense operations. This base strengthens NATO's northern defense and reinforces U.S. strategic dominance in the region. Arctic competition and global strategy. As the Arctic becomes more accessible, it is turning into a zone of competition. The United States views Greenland as essential to counter Russian military expansion in the Arctic, limit Chinese influence in Arctic infrastructure and resources, maintain freedom of navigation. Greenland helps anchor U.S. influence in a rapidly changing region. Rare earths and strategic resources. The United States is increasingly concerned about dependence on foreign supply chains, especially for rare earth elements. Greenland's mineral potential offers alternative sources of critical materials, reduced reliance on strategic competitors, long-term resource security. These economic interests complement military strategy. Political stability and democratic alignment. The United States prefers Greenland to remain aligned with democratic Western systems. Denmark and Greenland provide predictability, transparency, and shared values. U.S. interest is not about ownership, it's about alignment and access. Stability matters more than control. Why the interest became visible. Public attention spiked when U.S. leaders openly discussed Greenland. But this did not create U.S. interest, It revealed it. Greenland has always been part of American strategic thinking. Global shifts simply made that interest harder to ignore. The United States is interested in Greenland because Greenland protects America, anchors Arctic security, and shapes the future balance of power. It is a strategic partner, not a prize. And as global competition intensifies, Greenland's importance to the United States will only grow.
Why do China and Russia see Greenland as important? For China and Russia, Greenland represents opportunity, but also leverage. Unlike the United States, whose interest in Greenland is rooted in defense of existing power, China and Russia see Greenland as a way to expand influence, reshape Arctic dynamics, and challenge Western dominance in a changing global order. Russia, Arctic power and strategic depth. Russia views the Arctic as central to its national identity and security strategy. It possesses the longest Arctic coastline in the world and has heavily militarized its northern regions. For Moscow, Greenland matters not because Russia seeks to control it, but because Greenland anchors the Western Arctic. Military balance in the Arctic. Greenland hosts key NATO and U.S. installations that monitor Arctic airspace and missile activity. From Russia's perspective, Greenland strengthens NATO's northern defense, limits Russian freedom of maneuver, acts as a surveillance platform against Russian forces. Any shift in Greenland's political alignment directly affects Russia's strategic calculations. Arctic routes and strategic competition. As ice melts, Arctic sea routes are becoming more navigable. Russia wants to control Arctic shipping corridors, maintain dominance over northern trade routes, prevent NATO encirclement. Greenland's location makes it a crucial point in this broader Arctic chessboard. China, a rising power looking north. China has no Arctic territory, but it calls itself a near-Arctic state. This is not symbolic language, it reflects strategic ambition. China sees Greenland as part of its long-term global expansion, not militarily, but economically and diplomatically. Resources and supply chain security. China's interest in Greenland is strongly tied to natural resources. Greenland holds rare earth elements, critical minerals, untapped resource potential. China dominates global rare earth supply, but diversification matters, even for dominant players. Greenland offers alternative access and long-term security. Infrastructure and influence. China's approach is subtle. Rather than military bases, it seeks investment in infrastructure, mining partnerships, scientific research presence. These create influence without formal control. For small, resource-rich regions, this model can be powerful and risky. Challenging Western influence. Both China and Russia see Greenland as a pressure point within the Western alliance. Any weakening of Denmark's role, NATO's presence, or U.S. influence in Greenland would shift Arctic power balances, create strategic openings, and reduce Western cohesion. Greenland's autonomy debates therefore attract close attention from Beijing and Moscow. Why Greenland is careful. Greenland understands these interests. This is why independence discussions are cautious. Opening the door too quickly could invite unequal partnerships, strategic dependency, loss of control over resources. Greenland's leaders are aware that global powers do not compete out of goodwill. China and Russia see Greenland not as a frozen island, but as a future gateway. For Russia, it is about security and balance. For China, it is about access and influence. For Greenland, it is a warning. Strategic interest brings attention, but also pressure. And in global politics, attention is never neutral. What role does Greenland play in Arctic and NATO politics? Greenland is not a decision-maker within NATO, but it is one of the alliance's most strategically important locations.
Its role is not defined by political voice, but by geography, infrastructure, and necessity. In Arctic and NATO politics, Greenland functions as a strategic anchor, shaping security calculations far beyond its borders. Greenland as NATO's northern gate. Greenland sits at the entrance of the Arctic and the North Atlantic. Any movement between North America and Europe, the Arctic and the Atlantic, passes through or near Greenlandic airspace and waters. This makes Greenland a natural checkpoint for NATO's northern defense system. Early warning and surveillance. One of Greenland's most critical roles is early warning surveillance. Military installations in Greenland monitor missile launches, aircraft movements, and space activity. These systems provide NATO and the United States with vital response time in the event of a threat. Without Greenland, the Northern Defense Network would have a dangerous blind spot. Balancing Russian Arctic expansion. Russia has significantly increased its military presence in the Arctic. Greenland's role is to counterbalance this expansion, not through aggression, but through awareness and readiness. Greenland's location allows NATO to track Arctic naval routes, monitor airspace activity, maintain strategic balance. This stabilizing presence helps prevent miscalculation. Arctic cooperation and tension. Greenland also plays a role in non-military Arctic governance. Through Denmark, Greenland is part of Arctic Council discussions, environmental monitoring, and scientific cooperation. However, as global tensions rise, Arctic cooperation is increasingly overshadowed by security concerns, making Greenland's position even more sensitive. Limited political voice, maximum strategic value. Greenland does not set NATO policy, yet NATO policy must account for Greenland. This imbalance creates a paradox. Greenland carries strategic weight, but has limited influence over decisions affecting its territory. This reality fuels Greenland's desire for greater diplomatic involvement. Why NATO stability matters to Greenland. Despite concerns about autonomy, NATO provides security guarantees, predictable defense arrangements, and protection from external pressure. For Greenland, NATO presence is not about militarization, it's about stability. In Arctic and NATO politics, Greenland is a cornerstone. It guards the northern approaches, supports early warning systems, and stabilizes a region under growing pressure. Greenland may not command armies, but its land shapes the battlefield. And in modern geopolitics, location can be more powerful than force.
What natural resources does Greenland have? When people think of Greenland, they imagine ice, endless white landscapes, frozen seas, and isolation. But beneath that ice lies one of the most resource-rich territories on Earth. Greenland is not poor in resources, it is rich in them. The real question is not what Greenland has, but how and whether it can use them without losing control of its future. Greenland's natural resources can be divided into 4 major categories: marine resources, mineral wealth, energy potential, and environmental assets. Together, these resources explain why Greenland is becoming increasingly important economically and geopolitically. 1. Fisheries, the foundation of Greenland's economy. The ocean is Greenland's most reliable and fully developed natural resource. Fishing is not just an industry, it is the backbone of the entire economy. For decades, fisheries have provided the majority of Greenland's export income, thousands of jobs across coastal towns, a stable source of government revenue. Key species include shrimp, halibut, cod, and crab. These products are exported mainly to Europe, Asia, and North America. Control over fishing waters gives Greenland real economic power. Unlike minerals or oil, fisheries are already producing income today. This is why Greenland fiercely protects its fishing rights and why Denmark has limited influence in this sector. 2. Mineral resources, hidden wealth beneath the ice. Beneath Greenland's ice sheet and mountains lies a vast store of minerals that the modern world desperately needs. Greenland is believed to contain rare earth elements, iron ore, zinc, copper, gold, and uranium. Rare earth elements are especially important. They are essential for smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, satellites, and military technology. Global supply is currently dominated by China, which makes Greenland strategically attractive to other powers. However, mining in Greenland is extremely challenging. Harsh weather, lack of infrastructure, and environmental concerns make extraction expensive and politically sensitive. 3. Uranium, power, and controversy. Uranium deserves special attention. Greenland holds significant uranium deposits, which could be used for nuclear energy and defense-related technologies. For years, uranium mining was banned due to environmental and political concerns. Lifting restrictions sparked intense debate inside Greenland. Supporters argue uranium could fund independence. Critics fear environmental damage and foreign control. This debate reflects a deeper tension between economic ambition and cultural values. 4. Oil and gas potential, promise and risk. Offshore areas around Greenland may contain oil and natural gas reserves. If exploited, these resources could transform Greenland's economy overnight. However, the risks are enormous. Oil spills in icy waters would be catastrophic. Cleanup in icy conditions is nearly impossible. Global pressure to move away from fossil fuels is increasing. As a result, Greenland has taken a cautious approach, balancing potential wealth against long-term environmental survival. 5. Renewable energy, Greenland's silent advantage. Greenland's geography gives it enormous renewable energy potential. Melting glaciers and steep terrain create ideal conditions for hydropower, future green hydrogen production. Renewable energy offers something oil and mining do not: sustainable growth without permanent damage. Some experts believe Greenland might one day export clean energy rather than raw materials. 6. Climate change, unlocking resources, raising risks. Climate change is reshaping Greenland faster than almost anywhere on Earth. As ice melts, new land becomes accessible, mining and construction become easier, shipping routes expand. At the same time, climate change threatens coastal communities, traditional hunting and fishing, ecosystems that have sustained Inuit culture for centuries. Climate change is both an opportunity and a warning. 7. Tourism, nature as an economic resource. Greenland's landscapes, glaciers, wildlife, and indigenous culture are becoming valuable economic assets. Tourism offers economic diversification, jobs outside mining and fishing, global visibility. However, tourism must grow slowly. Infrastructure is limited, and mass tourism could damage fragile environments and cultural traditions. 8. The resource paradox, wealth without control. Greenland's greatest challenge is not the lack of resources, it is the risk of losing control over them. Key problems include dependence on foreign investment, limited local expertise, pressure from global powers, and risk of unequal agreements. History shows that resource-rich regions often remain poor if wealth is extracted without local control. Resources as destiny or danger. Greenland is rich in living resources, minerals, energy potential, and environmental beauty. These assets could support economic independence and national self-determination, but resources alone do not guarantee freedom. Greenland's future depends on whether it can protect its environment, strengthen local governance, control foreign influence, and balance growth with tradition. What Greenland chooses to do with its resources may determine not only its economy, but its identity. How does climate change affect Greenland and the world? Climate change is not a future threat for Greenland, it is a present reality, visible, measurable, and accelerating.
Nowhere on Earth is climate change moving faster or with more global consequences than in Greenland. What happens in Greenland does not stay in Greenland. Greenland, the front line of climate change. Greenland is warming at more than twice the global average. Its massive ice sheet, the second largest in the world, is melting at an unprecedented rate. Each year, Greenland loses hundreds of billions of tons of ice. This loss is no longer seasonal or temporary. It is structural and long-term. The melting ice is reshaping the land, the sea, and the lives of the people who depend on both. Rising sea levels, a global consequence. Greenland's ice sheet contains enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by several meters. Even partial melting already contributes significantly to coastal flooding, erosion of shorelines, and increased storm damage. Cities thousands of kilometers away from Asia to Europe to the Americas are affected by ice melting in Greenland. Ocean circulation and global climate systems. Fresh water from melting Greenland ice flows into the North Atlantic. This threatens to disrupt major ocean currents, including systems that regulate European weather patterns, monsoon cycles, and global temperature balance. A weakened circulation could lead to colder winters in Europe, altered rainfall patterns, and increased climate instability worldwide. Impact on Greenlandic communities. For Greenland's Inuit population, climate change is deeply personal. Melting ice affects traditional hunting routes, fishing seasons, food security, and community safety. Sea ice that once supported travel and hunting is now thinner and unpredictable. Knowledge passed down through generations is becoming unreliable. Economic opportunities and environmental risks. Climate change is opening Greenland to new shipping routes, easier access to minerals, and expanded tourism. But these opportunities come with risks: environmental damage, loss of biodiversity, and increased foreign pressure. What appears economically promising may be ecologically devastating. Wildlife and ecosystem disruption. Greenland's ecosystems are fragile. Rising temperatures threaten marine species, Arctic wildlife, and food chains. Changes in plankton populations affect fish stocks, which in turn impact global seafood markets. Greenland as a climate warning system. Scientists study Greenland not only to understand the Arctic, but to predict the planet's future. Greenland's ice acts as a climate archive, recording Earth's history. Its rapid loss is a warning signal that climate thresholds are being crossed. Greenland's fate is the world's fate. Greenland is not just a victim of climate change, it is a driver of global transformation. The melting of Greenland's ice links the Arctic to every coastline, economy, and climate system on Earth. How the world responds to Greenland's crisis will define the future of the planet.
How could melting ice change Greenland's future? Melting ice is the single most powerful force shaping Greenland's future. It is transforming the land, the economy, politics, identity, and Greenland's position in the world. What was once a frozen barrier is slowly becoming an open door, bringing opportunity, danger, and irreversible change. Greenland's future will be defined not by whether the ice melts, but by how Greenland responds as it does. 1. New land, new possibilities. As ice retreats, vast areas of land are being exposed for the first time in thousands of years. This newly uncovered land could enable mining and infrastructure development, expand agriculture in limited regions, support new settlements and transport routes. For a country with limited usable land, this is a historic shift. Greenland may physically grow, not in size, but in livable and usable space. 2. Economic transformation and resource access. Melting ice makes natural resources more accessible. Minerals, rare earth elements, and potential energy sites that were once unreachable are now within technical reach. This could strengthen Greenland's economy, reduce dependence on Danish subsidies, support long-term independence goals, but access does not equal control. Without careful planning, foreign companies could dominate extraction, while Greenland bears the environmental cost. 3. Shipping routes and global connectivity. As Arctic ice melts, new sea routes are opening. Greenland sits near emerging shipping corridors that could shorten trade routes between continents, increase port activity, integrate Greenland into global logistics. This could end Greenland's historic isolation, but also expose it to geopolitical pressure and security risks. 4. Social and cultural disruption. For Inuit communities, melting ice threatens more than geography, it threatens identity. Traditional ways of life depend on stable sea ice, predictable seasons, knowledge passed down through generations. As ice becomes unreliable, hunting routes vanish, food systems change, and cultural practices face erosion. Modernization may accelerate, but at the cost of cultural continuity. 5. Environmental instability and risk. Melting ice also brings instability. Risks include landslides and flooding, damage to infrastructure built on permafrost, loss of wildlife habitats. Economic development without environmental safeguards could permanently damage Greenland's fragile ecosystems. 6. Political power and global attention. As ice melts, Greenland becomes more visible and more valuable. This increases foreign interest, diplomatic pressure, strategic importance. Greenland could gain leverage in negotiations with Denmark and global powers, but increased attention also means increased vulnerability to external influence. Independence accelerated or complicated. Melting ice could accelerate independence by enabling economic self-reliance. At the same time, it could complicate independence by increasing dependence on foreign capital, creating environmental liabilities, drawing Greenland deeper into global power rivalries. Ice loss does not guarantee freedom. It reshapes the conditions under which freedom is pursued. A future written in water. Melting ice is rewriting Greenland's destiny. It is opening doors that were once sealed by ice, doors to wealth, connection, and autonomy. But it is also erasing foundations that supported culture, stability, and balance. Greenland's future will depend on whether it can turn melting ice into controlled progress rather than uncontrolled loss. The ice is melting. The question is whether Greenland will rise with it or be reshaped by forces beyond its control. Can Greenland survive economically as an independent country? Greenland's independence is often discussed as a political dream or a cultural right, but beneath the symbolism lies a harder question. Can Greenland actually survive economically on its own? The honest answer is complex. Yes, but only under strict conditions, and no if independence comes too fast or without control. 1. The reality of the Danish block grant. Today, Greenland receives a large annual financial grant from Denmark. This money represents a significant share of Greenland's government budget. Independence would mean losing this guaranteed support overnight or over time. No emotional argument can replace this economic reality. 2. A small population, big responsibilities. Greenland has a very small population spread across a vast territory. This creates unique economic pressure, high cost of services per person, expensive transport and logistics, limited tax base. Running a fully independent state, defense, diplomacy, regulation would dramatically increase expenses. 3. Fisheries, strong but vulnerable. Fishing is Greenland's economic engine. However, it depends on global markets. It is vulnerable to climate change. Over-reliance creates economic risk. An independent Greenland cannot rely on fisheries alone to sustain a modern state. 4. Resource wealth is not instant wealth. Mining and resource extraction are often seen as the solution, but here's the hidden truth. Mines take decades to become profitable. Foreign companies demand favorable terms. Environmental costs remain local. Without strong institutions, resource wealth could trap Greenland in dependency rather than free it. 5. The infrastructure trap. Economic independence requires infrastructure, ports, airports, power systems, digital networks. Building these in Arctic conditions is extremely expensive. Foreign investment may help, but it comes with political strings attached. 6. Human capital, the quiet limitation. One rarely discussed issue is skills. Greenland lacks large technical workforces, specialized administrative capacity, advanced research institutions. Independence would require massive investment in education and training long before political separation. 7. Strategic location as an economic asset. Greenland's geography gives it leverage. Its position offers transit potential, research partnerships, security cooperation revenue. Used wisely, Greenland could earn income without surrendering sovereignty. Gradual independence versus sudden break. The most realistic path is gradual economic independence before political independence. This means reducing reliance on Danish funds step by step, strengthening local institutions, keeping control over resources. Sudden independence would be economically dangerous. Survival depends on timing and control. Greenland can survive economically as an independent country, but only if independence is the final step, not the first. Without strong governance, diversified income, and control over foreign influence, independence could replace one dependency with another. Economic freedom must come before political freedom, or both will fail.
What would Denmark lose if Greenland became independent? At first glance, Greenland's independence may appear to benefit Denmark. Many assume Denmark would simply lose a financial responsibility and move on. In reality, Denmark would lose far more than money. Greenland's independence would reshape Denmark's political influence, strategic reach, and historical identity. 1. Loss of strategic power and global influence. Greenland gives Denmark an outsized role in global affairs. Through Greenland, Denmark holds influence in the Arctic, maintains relevance in NATO discussions, participates in global security conversations far beyond its size. An independent Greenland would significantly reduce Denmark's strategic footprint, especially in Arctic geopolitics. 2. Reduced role in Arctic governance. Greenland allows Denmark to be a key Arctic state. Without Greenland, Denmark's voice in Arctic councils would weaken. Its influence over Arctic shipping, research, and security would diminish. Other powers would fill the vacuum. This loss would be long-term and irreversible. 3. Loss of access to strategic geography. Greenland's location provides Denmark with access to critical North Atlantic routes, emerging Arctic shipping lanes, strategic military positioning. Independence would remove Denmark from one of the most geopolitically valuable regions of the 21st century. 4. Economic and resource implications. While Denmark provides financial support to Greenland, it also benefits indirectly from resource access agreements, stable governance in a resource-rich territory, long-term economic opportunities. An independent Greenland would control all negotiations, potentially excluding Denmark entirely. 5. Diplomatic and NATO consequences. Greenland strengthens Denmark's position within NATO. Its geography supports surveillance, early warning systems, and transatlantic defense cooperation. Losing Greenland would weaken Denmark's role in alliance planning and strategic defense. 6. Historical and moral legacy. Denmark's relationship with Greenland is deeply tied to its colonial past.
Independence would force Denmark to confront its colonial history more directly, redefine its role as a former governing power, accept a loss of historical continuity. This shift would carry emotional and symbolic weight. 7. Soft power and international identity. Greenland contributes to Denmark's image as a global Arctic stakeholder, a nation managing autonomy and partnership, a bridge between Europe and the Arctic. Independence would reshape how Denmark is perceived internationally. More than a territorial loss. If Greenland became independent, Denmark would not simply lose territory, it would lose influence, access, and a key part of its global relevance. Greenland's independence would mark the end of Denmark's Arctic era and force a profound redefinition of its role in world politics. How could an independent Greenland change the global balance of power? An independent Greenland would not become a superpower, but it would sit at the crossroads of power. And in geopolitics, location can matter more than size, population, or military strength. Greenland's independence would shift influence, alter alliances, and introduce a new strategic actor into a region already under intense global competition. 1. A new Arctic power emerges. Independence would instantly make Greenland a sovereign Arctic state. This would add a new voice in Arctic governance, complicate existing power balances, force global powers to renegotiate access and influence. Greenland would no longer be represented indirectly. It would speak for itself. 2. Reduced role in Arctic governance. Currently, Greenland strengthens Western alignment through Denmark and NATO. Independence could loosen automatic Western control, introduce strategic uncertainty, create competition among major powers. Even neutrality would reshape Arctic security calculations. 3. A strategic prize for global powers. An independent Greenland would face intense diplomatic pressure. The United States, China, and Russia would all seek military access, resource agreements, infrastructure partnerships. Greenland's choices could tilt regional power dynamics without firing a single shot. 4. A new model of small state power. Greenland could redefine how small states wield influence. By leveraging strategic geography, resource access, diplomatic neutrality, Greenland could gain outsized global relevance, similar to other strategically located small nations. 5. Economic influence through resources. Control over rare earth elements and Arctic routes could give Greenland leverage in global supply chains, green energy transitions, technology competition. Economic decisions in Nuuk could echo in global markets. 6. NATO and security realignment. NATO would be forced to adapt. Greenland could negotiate new defense arrangements, demand greater autonomy, redefine security cooperation. Any shift would ripple across transatlantic defense planning. 7. Risk of becoming a battleground of influence. The greatest danger is indirect domination. Without strong institutions, Greenland could become economically dependent, politically pressured, strategically constrained. Independence could replace one overseer with many competitors. Power without armies. An independent Greenland would not change the world by force, but by position. Its land would shape military planning. Its resources would influence global supply chains. Its decisions would affect Arctic stability. Greenland's independence would not end power struggles, it would relocate them.
What does the future hold for Greenland? Independence or a new form of control? Greenland's future will not be decided in a single vote, a single treaty, or a single generation. It will unfold slowly, shaped by choices made under pressure, from climate change, global powers, economic necessity, and cultural survival. The real question is not whether Greenland will become independent. The real question is what kind of independence it will achieve and at what cost? Independence as a long journey, not a moment. For Greenland, independence is not a dramatic break from the past. It is a gradual process of building control over land, resources, institutions, and identity. True independence requires economic self-reliance, strong governance, control over foreign influence, protection of culture and environment. Without these foundations, political independence would be fragile. The risk of a new form of control. History shows that formal independence does not always bring real freedom. Greenland faces the risk of replacing colonial administration with economic dependence on global powers. Foreign investment, strategic partnerships, and security agreements can quietly limit sovereignty if not carefully managed. Control does not always arrive with flags and armies. Sometimes it arrives with contracts. Climate change as both threat and catalyst. Melting ice is accelerating Greenland's future. It opens doors to resources, trade routes, global relevance. At the same time, it threatens traditional life, environmental balance, long-term stability. Climate change is forcing decisions that cannot be delayed. Culture as the anchor of sovereignty. Greenland's strongest defense is not military or economic, it is cultural. Language, tradition, and indigenous knowledge provide continuity in a rapidly changing world. A future that sacrifices identity for growth may achieve wealth but lose meaning. Independence without cultural survival would be hollow. A middle path, strategic autonomy. The most likely future for Greenland is not immediate independence nor permanent control by others. It is a middle path, greater autonomy, stronger international voice, carefully chosen partnerships. This path allows Greenland to grow into independence rather than rush toward it. A future still being written. Greenland stands at the edge of history, not frozen in ice, but moving with it. Its future will be shaped not only by what the world wants from Greenland, but by what Greenland chooses for itself. Independence is possible. So is a new form of control. The difference will be decided by patience, wisdom, and the courage to protect more than land, to protect identity. The ice is melting, the world is watching, and Greenland's story is only just beginning. Greenland is more than ice, more than land, and more than geopolitics. It is a place where history, climate, power, and identity collide. From ancient Inuit survival to colonial rule, from melting ice to global competition, Greenland's story is not just about the past or the future, it is about choice. A choice between dependence and self-determination, between short-term gain and long-term survival, between being controlled and choosing control. The world may see Greenland as a strategic asset, but for its people, Greenland is home. And the future of Greenland will not be decided by ice alone. It will be decided by the courage to protect what truly matters.